The Sherpa Screening Room is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks, which can be heard on podcast apps everywhere, and the Sherpa-lution YouTube page. It's where you'll hear from creators from many fields from all over the world. Now, we take you to the Sherpa Chalet, where your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, awaits you. Kind of like how I'm waiting to get paid for this.
In this episode of the Sherpa Screening Room, Jim the Podcast Sherpa interviews talent agent and psychologist, Dr. Albert Bramante. They discuss how Dr. Bramante helps instill confidence in his clients for their acting auditions. You know, the Sherpa once auditioned for a role in a car commercial. Now he won't stop bragging about the time he was almost chosen to play a speed bump.
Coming to you from Sherpa Chalet in beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's time for entertainment interviews in the Sherpa Screening Room. Grab an aisle seat and a bucket of popcorn, but don't crunch too loud or you'll miss the show. Now, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room. It is me, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from Sherpa-lu Studios here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, where I always am for you every week. And when we do the Sherpa Screening Room, we get to talk to the creators normally, the actors, the singers, the dancers, the directors, the producers, and so on and so forth. But this week, a little bit different. Every once in a while, we like to go behind the scenes and talk to the folks behind the scenes. And my guest is one of those folks. He is a talent agent. And along with being a talent agent, interestingly enough, he is also a psychologist, and he works with his clients to help get them in the right mind frame for their auditions. And we talked a lot about the auditioning process and what he does. He's also an author who wrote about this for his thesis in getting his doctorate. So we talked about his book as well. And, it's important to be in your right frame of mind when you're doing this, and you can't let your worst thoughts get to you. So his name is Albert Bramante. He comes from New Jersey. So I spent a little time chatting with him, and we're going to check it out just about now. Hello there, Rebels. We have a unique interview going on here today in the Sherpa Screening Room. My guest is Dr. Albert Bramante. He is a psychologist and a talent agent as well. And he actually last year wrote a book called Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. Albert, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
And I didn't mention, I always say, where my guests are from. And you are from the great state of New Jersey?
I sure am.
How long have you been, were you an agent first, or you were a psychologist? Or you went to school for psychology, I would presume?
Yeah, I did. And it was interesting because I was going for my doctorate right around the same time that I was operating an agency. So, and I actually did my doctoral thesis on actors. So that's where the book kind of was born out of.
When I read about you, I said, that's a unique combination, being a psychologist and a talent agent. Do you use psychology yourself to get clients? I mean, how do you present yourself to potential clients?
Well, I'm an agent first, always. Okay. When I'm working with actors, I'm always an agent first, and that's how I operate. And sometimes the psychology comes out when when I'm reading people or getting a feel for someone over time, or sometimes they need advice or want a little bit of a pep talk, and that's where I would use that in my psychology background. In a sense, but I always present myself as an agent first. That's primarily my role, with actors.
Mm-hmm. But they do obviously know that you're a psychologist as well.
Of course, yeah. Well, like I said,
surprise!
They can look me up. Exactly. All you have to do is Google. That's
Right. Yeah. kind of hard to hide from Google, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. It's a little hard to hide from Google. Yeah.
So what actually brought on this fascination with like the mental state of actors? Was there something that you were noticing with working with other actors?
When I first started, this was in the mid-2000s, right when I was started to enroll in the PhD program and start the program. I was noticing a strong disconnect from a lot of the actors I was working with. Like they were telling me one thing, they wanted to work, but their actions were telling me another story.
Mhm.
And their actions were, they were kept running into blocks, mental blocks. They kept, hurting themselves for success, self-sabotaging, shooting themselves in the foot. And I couldn't figure out why, and then when I started the PhD program, one of the the first year seminars, we had to start planning for our dissertation, our thesis, which is a capstone project. And our advisor had suggested that we pick a topic that is close to us, something that we really want to solve. And I just thought off the top of my head, what's wrong with these actors? Why are they self-sabotaging?
Mhm.
That's when my advisor said that's a great topic. And so after that was born, where that the whole conversation came in, where working with actors and self-sabotage.
So not to generalize or anything. I know a lot of times people will say that actors are very shy, insecure people, and that acting kind of gives them an outlet to kind of be the extrovert that they feel that they're not.
And that's really not that far from the truth.
Okay.
Actors are introverted, which I think a lot of actors are actually introverted, even though it may not seem that way. It may not appear that way that they're, like I said, that they're introverted in a sense. It may not appear that way. However, it is very true that they are, because a lot of times they're performing on stage or on screen or on camera, but they're doing it, for the art, not for the crowd or for the external validation.
Okay.
And so, what a lot of actors are sometimes very shy and soft-spoken when they're not performing. When you strip them down to their individuality.
Right. And there are obviously different levels of introversion too. It's not that they're all just these completely hold off, shy, quiet people. They're just, just probably different degrees of how outgoing they are with other people and how they interact, right?
Of course, yeah. And it varies. I mean, some of them are just, quiet. They're like their own, individual worlds. And you might not see them at the party, in the party scene, the Hollywood party scene.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they don't even like going to parties. They'll do it maybe for the, for the networking or for the what they need to do, and then they're out. It's like, okay, I'll go to this press event, stay the bare minimum, and I'm going home. Because it's too much, too much stimulation.
Right. They don't want the flashy lifestyle, and they don't necessarily need that either. I guess, everybody always has different needs anyway. And sometimes that's just not number one for them, where there are other people who are just like, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be rich. My picture is going to be on all the papers. And, and that's obviously a completely different type of person, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
When you're working with these people, you said that a lot of times they self-sabotage. What's like the main things that they feel that you feel that they're doing, that they're self-sabotaging? Is it just like doubt? Is it?
Well, a lot of it when it's self-sabotaging, it's, it could be also fear, fear of success, fear of failure, putting themselves out there, safety reasons. When I was talking about like self-sabotage, when I'm noticing it, they would not prepare for auditions, or sometimes be late to appointments, or blow off auditions that other actors would have really killed to have.
Right.
And I couldn't figure that out. Like, what's really happening here? Because these are some of the same people that were like saying, I really want to work. Well, here's the opportunity, the possible opportunity. And, you're passing that up. So I think a lot of it has to do with fear.
I guess that would make sense. And I mean, really, a realistic attitude to have, for any actor or actress is that, you're not going to get every role, even though you might be perfect for it, that there's always, maybe a reason why you didn't get the role. And it might not just be you. They may have their eyes set on somebody else, and they're just kind of going through the motions with you.
100%. You could really, as an actor, give a really great audition,
Mhm.
but it might not be, what they're looking for. You might be an inch too short or an inch too tall, the wrong eye color. You remind the producer of, their ex or something like that. Um, something very simple. The actor's role, in my opinion, is to give a good audition, and that's it. Once you give a good audition, that's all we expect you to do.
Right. And after that, it's in the producer's, director's hands from there, and they really have no control of it.
Yeah, and one real, I guess you can say, tip would be to, when an audition's over, let it go.
Mhm.
Let the audition go. It's over. Move on and focus on, and don't dwell on it. So as soon as you are done, with the audition, it's time to let it go and put it behind you, because now it's out of your control. And, the focus should be, okay, when's your next appointment? When's your next audition? That should be the focus. Like, okay, this is great, but next.
So when you're working with your clients and they've got an audition, apart from obviously doing a good audition, which would, be common sense, what else do you tell them to do? I mean, is there anything that they should do for follow-up, or even like when they walk into the room? Is there anything that they should present? Just confidence, or?
I would say confidence, determination, very much. What I would say in a sense would be to, once you get the audition, and you go into the room, you agree. Obviously, you greet them professionally,
Mhm.
and then you go right into it. A lot of times, when the audition environment can be very fast paced and very busy, so the goal is, this is not a time to socialize. This is not social hour. Go in, do your, say your lines. Sometimes the casting director may give you an adjustment, might give you some feedback, or ask you to do it again, or they may, you may just do it read one time, and that's it. And then as soon as they say thank you, or your role is to say thank you and walk away. Now, what you could do is a follow up is thank them for the audition afterwards. But don't, like, did I get it? Or please, just thank you for the audition. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you. And if it was somebody great to see you again.
Right. Like, not sounding even.
Exactly. And let it go.
Right.
And then, again, be focusing on the next one.
Yeah.
And it's a hard business, because very rarely does an actor get told that why they didn't get the role, or that they didn't get it at all. Very rarely, it's like no news. It's like, okay, you're not going to hear anything. So that's why it's best for the actor's psyche and mental health just to let it go. As soon as it's over, okay.
Right. And
it's
because you don't want them to carry that feeling of rejection from one audition into another, which is why you're saying let it go. It's just that one audition. Yeah. It's not going to change everything else.
And I would even kind of say, like, I wouldn't even look at it as rejection all the time. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it would be sort of like, there's, one thing I would say is, like, there's no such thing as rejection in a sense. There's, your services are just not needed.
Right.
At the moment.
Yeah. And also timing as well, too.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I get the chance to speak to a lot of actors on here as well, and a lot of them are people that my listeners would probably recognize, and there are some that they might not recognize. But I noticed the one common thread that they've all said about acting is you have to be patient, especially when you have the job, because everything takes time. So, there's got to be kind of, I guess, an appreciation for that patience before they're even told anything.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, you may not be told anything, and that's why, again, just letting it go. But the whole thing is that, as hard as it is, but the important thing is to not take it personally, because it's not about you. There's hundreds of actors sometimes trying out for a role. Only one person can get it. You know, so and a lot of times it's not personal.
Right.
You know, it is not. You know, and that's why I think it kind of separates the more resilient from the ones that get too worked up, or is they take it, the ones that get too worked up take it personal. And that's why I see a lot of actors in my years of doing this, a lot of actors quit business or leave their business and go into other professions because it takes a toll on them after a while.
Absolutely. I know you've actually spoken a little bit about imposter syndrome too with actors.
Yeah, well, because a lot of times what happens very often when you get a lot of no's, which is part of the reality of show business, you're going to get more no's than you're going to get yeses, no matter how talented or gifted you are as an actor. So that is a reality, and most of the time, getting a bunch of no's can start to wear you down. You're like, am I really right here? Am I really an actor? And then, of course, you have well-intentioned family and friends who are not in the business, who don't really understand it, and are going to be telling you, you got to get this acting up, get a real job,
Right.
And you hear these messages from your family and your friends, and it starts to wear down a bit. So one thing I was often say is, I try to, especially young actors, to know that you have to have almost a 20-year plan. If you really want to do this as a career, it's going to take years, not months. This is not a sprint. This is a journey. It's a long-term process that's going to take a long time to complete.
Absolutely. And even, the actors that I've spoken to that, like people might know, they all say the same thing, that there's no such thing as an overnight success. They said, you're seeing me in the one movie where somebody did say yes, but you don't know about the other movies where they didn't get the part.
Yeah. I mean, there's a statement that says, "Oh, yeah, they're overnight success. It only took them 15 years to become an overnight success."
Exactly.
You don't see the struggle behind it, and let's also be honest too. I mean, the reality is it's who you know. So if you're the son of the director or the nephew or niece of the of the studio executive, that's going to help you out a bit. I mean, I know that may not be the most PC thing to say, but that's going to help. And that's where we might see those random, successes happening. But it's going to be a grind, and it takes a long time. One of the well-known TV shows that was on for many years that won awards, and it was called This Is Us on NBC.
Sure.
And most of the actors that were series regulars on that, it was their first series regular job, but they were working for 10, 15 years or 20 years before that.
That's right.
That's right. And so that's where I think the reality has to come in. The resilience has to come in with that. And I think just, having that realism in a sense to know that this is not an overnight process. It's not gonna, not gonna happen. And that's where I feel like a lot of the education programs for actors and conservatory training are failing them, because they're telling them that, it's easy. You'll just get, work, all you have to do is show up and there you go.
Right.
And also in their schools, there's not a lot of competition. So they're getting these roles in their university or college production because there's no competition. There's 15 people in the theater roles, and sometimes 15 roles in the play. Well, there you go. You're going to get it all the time. That's not going to happen in the real world. Yeah, no. Or like they were the big man on campus or big man, in high school. And it's like, well, now you're out in the real world. It's different. It's a different dynamic. It's a different universe now. Now you're in a whole different ball game.
So when they're in high school and they're in college, they're really, when they're learning their craft, they're honing it. It's all about the art itself. It's like you said, it's not really about the business of it to really understand that, this is what you need to go through to get to a certain point. And there's no guarantee that you're even going to get to that point.
No, there's no guarantees. And, that is definitely something that might discourage certain people.
Yeah.
Is to know that there's no guarantee. There's no quick fix. It's not like, and this is not a profession where, you're guaranteed a job. Most professions, you work for a company 10, 20, 30 years, you're guaranteed retirement and boom, not show business.
Right.
And I think that can wear, the actor down over time, or any performer down, and that can, be the perfect breeding ground for imposter syndrome.
Sure. Could you talk a little bit about your book that came out last year, the Rise Above the Script book?
Sure. It was it's loosely based on my doctoral dissertation, and I talk about different aspects in the book. I talk about self-esteem, I talk about self-efficacy, I talk about personality factors, and then I go into, the imposter syndrome, fear of success. And there's a lot of strategies. Now, the book was written for performing artists. However, the reality of it, there's stuff in there that can benefit everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what profession you're in.
Sure.
And the real reason why I chose the title Rise Above the Script, I'm not talking about the scripts like you get in a movie or in a play. I'm talking about the script in your mind, your script in your subconscious.
One of my pod friends is a lady named Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, and she has a podcast called Talk About Talk, and she works with executives on executive communication. And a lot of the things that you're mentioning are like almost identical to the things that she talks about with her clients, about having, imposter syndrome and having self-doubt, and how to, she does a lot about like personal branding, which I'm sure is probably a big thing for your clients as well.
Of course. And also how, with communication, what words are you using? What choice of words are you using?
Right.
Because there's almost a romanticization of the starving artist or the struggling artist.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost become glamorized. And so when you say to someone, I'm a starving artist, I'm a struggling artist, or you say it to yourself, or you say it to other people, you're reinforcing that and you're creating that reality. So I often say it's like when if you did a professional job, or whether you did a professional theater production where people pay tickets to see you, then that you're a professional working actor.
Right.
And that's how you should only be referring to yourself. I'm a professional working actor. I'm not a starving artist. I'm not a struggling artist.
Right.
Because when you say those words, and I'm assuming this also applies to executives, the words you use create the reality, and also create other people's perceptions of you.
Sure. Yeah, and not too many people are gonna want to care about the starving clerk behind the counter at Burger King.
Exactly. Or the barista making coffee who says they're not, an inspiring actor. Nobody cares. And that's the truth. And that's why, like, you're a professional working actor, and that will start to add to a lot of things. So, and then I also address perceptions of money.
Right.
Now, a lot of society has kind of, I think, gotten the views of money incorrect. I mean, we hear the statement a lot, money is the root of all evil, which was actually a misquote.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was supposed to be the love of money is the root of all evil, not money. Money is not the root of all evil.
Right.
And, I think if you internalize that, or you grow up in families where you're taught that, people with money are greedy. Well, you're not greedy, so therefore you're not going to have money. And, if you, dealt that into your subconscious mind, why would you want to be, greedy or evil? So I'll be broke instead.
Yeah.
So I think, we have to also change the relationship we have with money also when we're dealing with actors and artists.
In the time that you've been doing this, is there any, I guess, we'll say particular success stories for any of the folks that you've worked with?
Well, I mean, I've seen people really get comfortable and in their skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like one lady I wound up signing. I was a guest for a while in an acting class where I would kind of give my perspectives and things as an agent. And there was a class in the city. Mm-hmm. And this one actress who's been there, she's been doing, studying for over 10 years. And she never really found her voice. And It wasn't until we really sat and worked with her, and I kind of helped her claim her power, not so much as an actor, but just as a person. And once she claimed her power and started owning her type, which is like the tough, powerful heart of gold, she wound up booking, a couple of roles,
Right.
right off the bat. So I think when you maintain and improve your confidence level, you're going to start really seeing things differently.
I mean, I know obviously you're not going to give any names. Did you ever have people come to you and I know some of them, they say, "Oh, I want to be an actor," but they kind of have these delusions of grandeur where they're like, "Oh, you're going to represent the next biggest thing on television, and it's going to be me because I'm going to be the sexiest guy on TV." And meanwhile, the appearance might not exactly be what viewers are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, or I'll get, I'm the next Denzel Washington. I'm like, no, you're not.
Right.
There's only one Denzel Washington. And that is one of the biggest things I'll correct. I'm like, no, don't compare yourself to somebody else. As an actor, you have to be unique and bring something new to the table. That's another thing to success as an actor, is bringing your own voice to everything and bringing your own personality, your own voice, because that's what's going to help, you succeed in a sense.
Yeah, no. And it's interesting that you bring that up because one thing that always bothered me, because I listen to like a lot of podcasts, being the Sherpa, and I think a lot of these hosts think that they're somebody else and they're not being themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't be the next Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has that all locked up. I want to be the first Jimmy podcast Sherpa. I don't want to be the next Joe Rogan.
Well, I mean, not only that, it'll sound so authentic, and I'm not going to mention names either. But I've been guests on podcasts where I've seen people do all these crazy voices, and I want to almost privately stop the recording and say, "What are you doing? It doesn't. It sounds. You're trying to be the announcer. Stop it. Be yourself." And that's just again, Joe Rogan is Joe Rogan because he was host of Fear Factor. He was tied to the UFC. And he has his own style, which and plus he already has over 3,000 episodes that he has already produced. So
exactly,
when you're starting out or even doing your first couple, you're not going to be Joe Rogan. You're not going to have the audience with Joe Rogan, but you're still you. And then if you really own your voice, you're going to find your audience that's going to love you and that's going to appreciate, and then that's going to snowball.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you, Albert. Next time you are on a podcast and you see somebody they're going into, some other podcast land while they're interviewing you, just stand up and slap them across the face and say, "The Sherpa told me to tell you to knock it off." This way you don't have to be held accountable.
Sure, and you'll pay me on the jowl, I assume, after that.
Yeah.
Okay. I may call you and say, "Hey, I get my one phone call." I'm like,
I'd be like, Albert, could you spell that last name again?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing, yeah.
He must have been inspired by one of my shows.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, but no, and that's true too. I that was on another podcast once, and this person was using like applause, laugh, tracks. I'm like, stop. This sounds phony,
right?
And so, but you're absolutely right. And I think that is with anything. You have to find your own voice and work with that. And, it's going to take a while, just like, speakers. You're not going to be speaking on doing TED Talks, when you first start doing speaking.
Exactly.
You're not going to be Joe Rogan when you first do podcasts.
Yeah.
You're not, that's the reality. But you can still be you and just do be consistently.
I understand you're on social media. You're on Instagram under your name?
Yeah, Dr. Al Bramante. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. And I post a lot of content there. Same thing on my Instagram. And you can always reach out to me, if you have any questions or comments. I'm always open to DMs and messages.
Is there a website if people want to?
Yeah, you can read. It's right. It's still a work in progress, but it's albertbramante.com.
Okay. And when they see you on social media, they catch like your pointers for doing auditions and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll post updates, articles, on LinkedIn, and then sometimes short videos on, Instagram. And
his name is Dr. Albert Bramante. Again, the book is called Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. Albert, it was so nice meeting you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you again, Jim, for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad you invited me. Thank you again.
Listen and subscribe on podcast apps everywhere. And we're on YouTube at Sherpa-lution. Sorry, no video. You're welcome.
Thanks so much to Dr. Albert Bramante for spending a little time here in the Sherpa screening room. And I've attached the link to his book in our show notes if you want to read about it. And I know he does some social media appearances on podcasts as well. And he's got his own Instagram page, as he mentioned during the interview. Thank you to you for spending some time as well checking this show out. And as you well know, Saturdays, Sherpa Select time. It's when we throw back to the first 7 seasons. I get to pick out some of my favorite episodes and give them a replay so that they end up ultimately on the Sherpa-lution YouTube page, where you can hear all the podcasts as well as on podcast apps everywhere. Pretty cool, huh? Next week, it's True Crime Screening Room. I will be interviewing an author named Daniel Zimmerman, and he's got a new book out called Jason's Run. This is a wild one. I think if you're a true crime fan, you're going to really enjoy this interview. So make sure you join me next week. I thank you so much. And until then, Lord Mr. Bruce, I say, Viva la Sherpa-lution.
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. I'm Mr. Bruce, and this has been a Sherpa-lu Studios production. Viva la Sherpa-lution!